Many people say, why should I vote? My vote doesn't matter. Unless we amend the Electoral College, this unfortunate statement will become true. Like everyone in this room, I believe that every vote matters. I believe that our vote is our voice, and we must do everything we can to protect that. Amending the Electoral College is the most efficient way to ensure that every vote has an equal weight in our presidential elections. During this presentation, we'll discuss the thoughts of major political scholars who believe that the Electoral College disenfranchises the majority in favor of the minority. We'll consider an initiative that was created to use the existing electoral powers given to the states to address this issue. And finally, we'll imagine what it would look like if these changes were implemented. Now, at this point, you might be saying, why do we need to amend the Electoral College? So let's take a look at some of those reasons. When the Constitution and the Electoral College were created in 1787, the framers had very specific interests in mind. They were trying to protect the rights of slave-owning southern states, and they were concerned that the uneducated masses would be incapable of selecting a suitable president. The states' right dynamic that they created gave greater electoral power to the southern states. That dynamic continues today. In fact, because the vast majority of Americans live in urban areas, 80%, according to Lazaro Gamio of the Washington Post, these majorities are grossly misrepresented in our current electoral process. This map that he published in the Washington Post gives you a great illustration of what he was talking about. Here we see the traditional electoral map. Here we have the electoral map represented relative to the national popular vote. I think this does a fine job of identifying the differences in how our votes are processed. Adam Eichen of the New Republic wrote that because the Electoral College is structured in the way it is, the vast majority of states are rendered largely irrelevant in a presidential election. And Professor Sarah Wheeler wrote that because of the winner-takes-all rule, the vast majority of Americans' votes are largely irrelevant. To this point, we've discussed why it's important to amend the Electoral College. So now let's take a moment to consider how we might make these changes. Constitutional scholars and elected officials disagree as to how we might amend the Electoral College. Conservative writer Fred Lucas writes that conservative politicians feel that in order to amend the Electoral College, it would require an act of Congress. Advocates of changing the Electoral College realize that this is largely impossible. So a group of former congressional members and political scholars, legal experts, got together and created an organization called the National Popular Vote. Their goal is to do three things: to ensure that every vote is counted equally, to ensure that the winner of the popular vote is elected president, and to ensure that the rights of all states are treated equally in our electoral process. This could be accomplished by using existing powers given to the states by the framers of the Constitution. At this time, there are 16 states with 196 electoral votes that have ratified this initiative. So we've discussed a very valid way of amending the Electoral College. Let's take a look at what modifying the Electoral College might look like. Amending the Electoral College would give every voter an equal say in our elections. Making states more competitive would ensure that the interests of all citizens are considered in our presidential elections. And finally, and possibly most importantly, The winner of the national popular vote would become the president, and as a result would have not only the support of the American people, but a mandate for change. As citizens of the United States, we expect that our votes will be treated fairly. When they're not, when this expectation falls short, then we must speak up. During this presentation, we've discussed why the Electoral College disenfranchises the majority of Americans. We've considered an initiative that would amend the Electoral College with existing rights given to the states, and considered why it's important that the winner-takes-all rule is abolished and how that might look once it was. The challenges we face as a country are significant, and because of this, every vote should be counted equally. When our electoral policies fall short of that goal, we must demand change. Historian John Meacham wrote, "We cannot guarantee equal outcomes, but we must do all that we can to ensure equal opportunity." I encourage each of you to visit the National Popular Vote website and download their ebook, Every Vote Equal, and consider why this issue is so important to you as a voter and to us collectively as citizens of the United States. I'd like to thank you for your time tonight and open the floor to anyone that might have a question.